All right, and up next on the agenda tonight, we have a fun little segment called Show and or Tell. So anybody can go around the room and share something that they have done recently to prepare their home or their family or their car. It could be a Map Your Neighborhood update if that's something that you are participating in. Certainly not required, but if you've been up to any activities that you want to share with the group, maybe gathering some supplies or writing down some plans. We just like to check in with each other, see if we have ideas to share. I did have a pretty fun meeting. I met with Joel and Charles Z. I think it was last week. We got together and we practiced with our FRS radios just a little bit. We walked across the park from one another and made up a couple of fake scenarios to call into one another and just make sure that our radios worked. We'd all pretty freshly gotten them. So that was a pretty fun activity just to feel the confidence of, actually transmitting over the radio. So that was a cool little exercise. Yeah, Dwight.
I've been checking into solar powered battery packs to charge cell phones, etc. In case of emergency, at least we have access to our phones.
That's good. Have you found any promising products?
So far, the Patriot looks like it's the best deal, but I'm trying to shoehorn it into my limited budget.
For sure, those solar things are expensive. Awesome.
I've been doing a few things, Jackie, about mainly reading and finding good sources of information about, what kind of equipment to purchase when, some people have done some analysis like the New York Times did. They have a wire cutter section and they did some really interesting, ideas on, like 3 different options for each thing, like the radio or first aid kits or water containers, things like that. And so, yeah, if anyone gets New York Times, you might want to go out and check. They have because it's the emergency preparedness month. It's a good time to get. There's a lot of articles getting written and a lot of new information.
Awesome. I think I saw another hand. Yep.
Oh, Jackie, I have a couple of things to share. I've been filling up water jugs. You can see the blue jugs in the back. That's quite a long process. You have to wash them out before you store them and stuff, but I have 6 of those that are in my garage now, and that feels really comforting. I put the dates on that I put them in so that every 6 months I can replace the water. So it's like I don't have to keep thinking and worrying about that. The other thing is I came into 2 of tools. They're meant for much the same thing in one capacity, and that was to turn off the gas outside my house. I'll probably put this very nearby the the meter, and let a few of my neighbors know. Yes.
Just hook it up with a piece of wire.
Okay.
So it's right there at the turnoff.
Right. So, that's about it. This tool has a control for the water turnoff, which I have some concerns about. The box that my water turnoff is in is awfully small, and when plumbers have had to come out and turn it off, they really struggle with it, and they do this all day long. And I've called eWeb. They sent someone out and managed to not get a hold of me, even though I was at home. So this may be an ongoing conversation with eWeb, because I'd actually like the box to be made larger so that the controls can move much more easily. I don't know if any of you have had that problem. I'm hoping they'll eventually work with me on that. So that's it.
So the question is, who owns that box? Are they going to tell you that's your responsibility?
I don't know.
We haven't gotten that far, but I hear what you're saying. Thea, you were saying? You're muted. You're muted.
Do you know if you're slated to get smart meters? Because they just replaced them on our street and they definitely own that meter. And even without a smart meter, it can cost $300 to repair it or replace it or start it up again if somebody shuts it off in the wrong way and it gets ruined. That's happened before. So you have to be really careful with those. And not let somebody do it who doesn't know what they're doing. But I would call them and see if you're slated to get smart meters so that problem could be solved. I'm not an advocate of them, but it's kind of hard to resist them.
So getting the smart meter is the way of reading the amount of water that you're using, but is it also, does it necessarily change how the water is manually turned on and off?
I don't know. They are totally different boxes, though, and they're painted different, and the valves are different. So,
well, then it wouldn't affect this then.
Yeah, they replaced the whole box, the whole unit. So
but
anyway,
you're saying that the whole box is replaced, not that that this meter is in a separate box, but that the whole water control box is replaced.
I know they replaced the cover and what's inside it, maybe not the actual cement vault, but it's something. If River Road hasn't been slated, you're lucky, but you get the electric meter if you have EWEB, and then you get the smart meter, the water meter. You get two different ones.
We got our smart meter a couple of months ago, and the box is about 50% larger of the old one.
Yeah, seems bigger to me too. It's a big hassle. They take out your lavender bushes and everything. Sorry.
No, I'm having some difficulty communicating with them, and so I will. That's a whole new approach. Thank you, Thea. I'll work on that.
Do they just replace them? Is it something free of charge just because they're upgrading? Okay, I don't think they've hit our area yet either.
They charge you if you opt out and don't want them.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh,
So,
well, okay.
Yeah.
So one other thing I found out, I contacted Northwest Gas and just to verify something I'd said a while back about that they have automatic switches built into their system, so that if they get they have these excessive leak monitors, and if they get excessive leak, it does turn the system off, but there is still a little bit of gas that's going through, so that they can figure out where the leak is. So you'll still end up having to turn your gas off if you think if it's happening, but so there is just a tiny bit, just enough so they can, I guess they have equipment that they can find it, or they can smell it or whatever. But
so Joel, I think in your describing this before, the good news is that if there were an earthquake and they detected that there were ruptured pipes, they can turn it down to the smallest trickle. Is this the correct restatement?
Well, it automatically does. It's built in.
Okay, it automatically. So there are controls, not just outside each of our homes, but if we have natural gas.
The main line.
Yeah, that's what Shake Alert does.
Yeah, and so basically, we're pretty well covered. And another thing to notice is that Northwest Gas has probably in the whole United States has upgraded their system, and they're probably the most resilient to earthquakes of any gas company in the United States. So, they did it right when they upgraded. So they have lots of flexible lines and things like that. So hopefully we'll all have our gas if we get the big earthquake. And
we have to put a disclaimer. Do you have any ties to Northwest Gas, Joel? Are you making any money off of these
yeah,
statements?
why did I forget to talk about them? No, I don't.
Okay.
I've I went to the CERT steering committee last week, I think, and they're, like there were some events that were scheduled for Eugene, but a couple of events have been canceled since they were scheduled. The thing in Amazon Park is canceled, and then I think was it the radio deal that was in September, I think, is canceled. And but then also, but the thing they're thinking of a steering committee is that there's going to be a need to have a CERT people to get a team together of 10 people who can operate a point of distribution center, and you've seen in the disaster movies, where the truck backs up to like a flatbed truck backs up to a crowd of 20,000 people, and they start throwing sea rations or loaves of bread or something off the back of the truck. So that's a point of distribution. And so there'd be a team of 10 people who would take various training courses to operate a point of distribution. And there's in Northwest Eugene, there's like 3 or 4 sites where there's going to be where there's on school properties where there's a well, and eWeb will turn these wells on in the event of if the systems get shut down, they'll turn these wells on, and so those will be points of distribution where people can come and fill jugs with water. And so this team, the CERT team, will operate those points of distribution. And so there's point of distribution training, and there's traffic management training, and then crowd control training. And so that would be, in addition to the regular CERT training. But so that's something that'll be probably going on this winter for people who have completed the CERT basic training, or else are going to take it this fall.
Do we know where those 4 sites are?
Yeah, I've got it written. I've got it written down. I think there's a couple in the Bethel neighborhood, and there's at least one. Is it Howard Elementary?
Yeah, Howard Elementary.
That's in the River Road area.
So you're talking 4 in the city.
No, 4 in the Northwest District. So I think there's 2 at River Road and 2 at Bethel. 2 in the Bethel neighborhood and 2 in the River Road neighborhood.
I only know of the Howard one. Huh?
I can only, my memory is faulty, I guess you'd say.
Well, if you can let the group know at some point, that'd be good to know.
That was the first one, and they had a big grand opening there and invited the public to come see it.
Howard, yeah.
Yeah, and there's you can Google it and get information,
I think
and also on the eWeb site as well.
Oh, okay. I think Prairie Mountain's another one. Their elementary school out there. But
And in case anybody doesn't know what CERT is, that's the Community Emergency Response Team training that you can take through the city, that's offered here to be learn how to prepare your family and respond to your neighborhood in disaster. So in case anybody isn't sure what that is, there's acronyms everywhere.
Ed, I have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know if the understanding bystanders, is that going to be held? I'm really worried about the pandemic issues.
Did you say the bystander upstander training?
The upstander bystander workshop.
I believe the city's putting one on.
Right.
Okay. You want to know when that is?
No, it's September 28th.
Okay.
At the Campbell Community Center. But I'm concerned about whether they're really going to have it, and I was wondering if you heard anything.
The earlier, I think last year they had it, and it was on Zoom.
Yeah.
And so I suspect, I suspect it'll be on Zoom, but I'm not positive. I haven't heard from them.
No, they rescheduled it for September 28th from 6 to 9, and it's all in one evening.
I took it last summer, and it was a couple of days on Zoom. They did quite well with it on Zoom, and it was very worthwhile. from the city, yeah.
I have no idea where the Campbell Community.
It's at Second and High. It's the senior center down there by Skinner's Butte Park.
It's, yeah, at the north side of Skinner's Butte.
It's a great place to visit if you haven't been there. They've remodeled it. Well,
I'm
normally it's great.
sure I can, my GPS will find it.
I've got it in my notebook as a being on Zoom.
But then she sent another one that said, guess what? We're gonna do this all in one night.
Wow. That's a long
Yeah.
one.
Yeah. Yep, maybe
I
we can
probably
follow
won't
up
go
on
if
that.
it's in person.
Right. All right. All right, so that brings us to our next section of the agenda, which is going to be a power outage discussion. And we want this to be an interactive discussion here coming up into the winter season. We'd like to know just if neighbors want to share their experiences. Have you experienced power outages here in the River Road neighborhood? How long did it last? What kind of struggles did you face while your power was out? Did you take any steps to make it better for next time? We'd like to be able to collect some of this information and spread the word to our neighbors to start preparing ahead of time for this upcoming season. So let us know what your thoughts are, if anybody has experienced that or if they want to share with us. Yeah,
I
Chris?
think we've been in our house 33 years. It's been a while. 30, at least 30, my memory. Like you said, Ed. We've had 2 power outages in that whole time. I mean, we are lucky. I think I have a friend in Mississippi and their power is going out all the time. Just every week they're having one. So the one was with the ice storm 3 years ago, maybe. If you all remember that. That was, I don't know, it was maybe 5 or 6 hours and we had candles. And I mean, we really weren't inconvenienced. It was kind of late at night and we just went to bed. And so that, I mean, that's a really good point. I don't think we prepare for power outages because we're not that familiar with them, at least. I'm not here. I grew up in Montana. It was pretty often, but we're lucky here. We have good e-web. Yes.
And being River Road, I live across the street from Chris.
Mhm.
And I wasn't living here then, but the power went out for 5 days at least. So just because I'm in the county and Chris is in the city and the power lines are underground where she is, it literally is across the
Oh,
street.
like across the street, it was out for 5 days. Really? And
Mhm.
we were hours.
Yeah,
So there's a good reason to bury all of this stuff.
but I'll know to knock on your door if that happens.
Yeah. Yeah, come on down. We'll have the power. That's amazing. Mm.
The
Yeah,
advantage of a map your neighborhood group is learning who has what and
Right.
how you can meet each other ahead of time to know it's comfortable and okay to share what you do have if needed.
Mhm.
Yeah, along those same lines as Charlesy, that what you had heard, my husband and I bought our house in October of 2016, and then the snowstorm was that December of 2016, and we were without power for 5 days after that. It took a bunch of trees down in our yard as well. We suffered a lot of damage to our house and structures in our backyard. So there was a lot of tree impact and landscape damage and property damage, but we were also out of power for 5 days. So we had to scramble and get a generator. We were lucky enough to get a generator at that time to be able to power some things, but it was a long time without power. It was freezing cold. So I'm sure others have had those long experiences.
Yeah.
This has been a major motivation for me to look into power supplies, alternative power supplies that can be solar powered, because even I don't know in Oregon, but I know that overcast skies, you can still get solar to work. So yeah, I'm looking at alternatives for sure.
I've got like a Coleman stove and about 5 gallons of Coleman fuel, and then I've got a propane 3-burner stove with an oven and about, I think it's about 20 gallons of propane, and then some flashlights and stuff. But I've never really had a big power outage. I haven't been here very long, but just in my life, I've had very rarely had power outages. But and then I have like food and stuff, and I think a lot of times power outages are in the winter, so then you don't have to worry so much about refrigeration,
Right.
which is kind of a handy. And but then you might have to melt water, so melt ice to get drinking water. But anyway, yeah. So I feel pretty prepared. I actually have a carbon monoxide detector in case I have to bring the propane stove in, or something. But it's anyway, it's probably and we'd probably leave the house and move into our shed in the backyard, because it's quite a bit smaller, but it's insulated, and it'd be easier to keep it warm and stuff. And then we have a fireplace, and whenever one of the neighbors cut down a tree, and we had their apple trees pruned, and so I saved all the wood and have been drying it, and I have a little wood shed, and I probably have a few days worth of firewood I could burn to just keep things warm. But it's anyway, and I just hate to be cold,
Oh, Ed, you sinner. That apple wood should be used for smoking meat.
What?
Waste it on wood, get oak or something.
So I know that Ian, who's brand new to this group, I'm going to put him on the spot a bit. You know a lot about urban forests and so on. Do you know much about what happened to the forest areas here in River Road, for instance, as a result of that freeze? Or do you have any words of advice? You're muted.
You're muted.
There we go. Sorry. Yeah, so this is for a couple of years ago when we had that ice storm, right?
Yeah.
How about you give me a second and I'll look into it right now, and I'll give you a more complete answer instead of stuttering around.
Yeah, I mean, even as I look around, just looking at the impact still today, there are tons of broken trees and broken limbs just kind of dangling up high around the neighborhood. We have such tall trees here. I don't know if you all see that same thing around your house as well, but does anybody have ideas of how we could encourage our neighbors to take care of those things before they come down and become true problems?
That we, when I worked in the woods, we called those widow makers, and they're pretty dangerous, and it is expensive to get a tree company, a tree surgeon or whatever you call it, to come and work on them, but it's worth it if there's a risk of that stuff falling onto a neighbor. You're liable for all that stuff. Or if your tree falls on your neighbor's house, you're liable for any damage. And so I mean, it's just, but as far as encourage, I mean, I know some people don't want to spend the money, so it is an issue. But I also have a bunch of black plastic, 6 mil black plastic, in case something comes down on my roof, I can patch it up temporarily. It's good. It's something you really could talk to your neighbors about and just advise them, that it's risky to keep widowmakers up there in the air.
I wonder if any of that's covered by insurance if you do it right after a storm, because you have to have somebody come and pull the limb out. I don't know, but it'd be interesting to find out.
homeowner's insurance covers your liability if one of your trees damages somebody else's property, I believe.
But if it's just sitting up there and waiting for a good wind to knock it down, I wonder if they would pay also to have that taken down.
Oh, if like preemptively?
Yeah.
I don't think my insurance company would do that.
Yeah.
Jerry, do you have a experience there?
You're muted, Jerry.
Yeah, I got it now. So I went through all this. When I lived up in the Santa Cruz Mountains, I had 4 or 5 big redwoods on my property. And one of them was on the property line with the neighbor, and we were in the middle of a big storm. And one of the redwoods was kind of leaning over and was going to go into his house. So I immediately called an arborist and paid a lot of money to have the tree taken down.
Yeah.
Storm. Wasn't cheap. After that was all done, I called my insurance company and I said, "So, you're going to pay for this?" And they went, "Absolutely not."
Of course not.
And I went, "Well, okay, next time I'll let it fall on the neighbor's house and then you will pay for it."
Yeah.
And she just got real, "Mr. Brown, you're being recorded and we have this on now. If you don't maintain your trees, we're going to," she just started. So basically, you have to take it, especially those are called act of gods, and your insurance is not likely to take care of it during the storm.
Well, another concern I have about widowmakers or dead parts of trees is that in a fire situation, they are just bound to erupt immediately. So yeah, maybe the map your neighborhood effort is a way of gently pointing these things out collectively that we might want to. It just so happens in our neighborhood, we have a master sawyer. I don't know whether he, for a price much less than the arborist perhaps, would be able to take care of that. And that's the benefit of Map Your Neighborhood. You find out the expertise that is around you.
Yeah, Thea.
If your property or your neighbors is in the city limits of Eugene, then street trees have a different status, where the city often is expected to take care of them or is responsible for them. When we've had them come down, the city has been able to clean them up or chalk the rest of them down or whatever. We're very worried about widowmakers here in the past, and some did come down in the ice storm. One thing I found most handy in my preparedness kit for power outages is a big roll of yellow caution tape. And I go out, at 3 a.m. after I hear them cracking and falling in the street, and I'm able to very cautiously slip around and mark it with yellow caution tape. They rerouted the bus off of Chambers down our street during the last storm, and they would have run right into this huge branch if it hadn't been marked off. And so that's something to consider, having that caution tape can come in handy for a lot of reasons. And on the sidewalks, all our sidewalks were covered with broken branches. And during that last ice storm, we had 2 rentals without heat for 5 days. Our house stayed good because we had the EWEP had come through the easement and cut back all the things that were near the wires. Again, it was their prerogative and their thing to do it, so we didn't have to pay for that, but that saved our house. And so I had the renters and everybody else come over here and camp out and supply power and everything for them. And so it is good to check on your neighbors and find out who is without them and not let them suffer if you do have sources available. I love the carbon dioxide reminder there, Ed. That's really important. Thank you. Oh, I'll say one more thing. if I could. eWeb has a great presentation about what they do when a storm happens for monitoring street trees and hazard trees, and the incredible computerized assisted system they have that they go through when you do see a tree that's a problem and report it. It's an excellent presentation to watch if you can find that on their website somewhere, and are served by eWeb. It can be very, very informative. I'm thinking of showing at our next fan summer general meeting, because we're going to have trees as our topic, and the lessening tree canopy in Eugene, and what can be done to help the trees that are getting stricken by drought and other problems.
Yes. That actually trees is also on the ARCO general meeting agenda for, was it next Monday, Jackie?
I think so.
Yeah.
Really? All right.
Yeah,
Great.
and actually, yes, I'm looking forward to it.
Great minds. Thank you
yeah.
for mentioning that.
You
I'll
might
let our
want to, yeah. Yeah, Thea, you might want to pop in on that too.
So something that I thought of while you guys were talking is kind of moving away from the trees, but more so what can you do in your own home when a power outage occurs is I like to make checklists. I like to leave lists around for a lot of things. It helps me to remember things. So in the event of a power outage, what are the first things you would do? Do you know where your emergency candles are at? Do you know where your flashlights are? We actually have our flashlights mounted to the wall next to our floor and with glow in the dark tape wrapped around them, so that if the power does go out and you have to crawl to it or something, you can find it, or even in the event of a fire, if you're on the floor and crawling through smoke. So knowing where those flashlights are and those sources of light to be able to move on to your next steps of responding to that emergency, I think are really important. Making a list of what you need to do. Yeah.
I was gonna say, we camp too, and we have, they're like little Coleman lanterns that are battery operated. So those come in really handy in that situation, although I love the candlelight, but there's a fire hazard if you go to sleep with, hundreds of candles lighting your way.
I've recently discovered battery operated candles, and I've been buying up all the ones I see at thrift stores and all the 2032 batteries, and I love them. You can carry them around, you can throw them around, you can put them in your car, anywhere, you don't have to worry about them, and they're great sources of light.
Travel with them. So that you
Yeah,
can have
yeah,
them
put one in
house.
your bag and just turn it on when you need it. It's amazing. It's handier than a headlight. I
Yeah.
also go to sleep with a headlight around my wrist or neck during a storm. If I hear there's a red flag event or anything, I always know where to get my light on if in an emergency.
I recently got this thing, which is
Yeah, Lucy.
yeah, it's got a name. It's an inflatable solar powered lamp,
Wow.
and so
I love that. Where did you get it?
it blinks if you want it to blink. And then that's a solar receiver. And then you can let the air out, and it just folds down flat. But and where I got it, I can't remember.
You can get them at REI or Amazon. They're
I was gonna
Amazon,
say
I think.
Amazon.
They're called Lucy lights. They're a favorite of
Lucy?
backpackers, and some of them will charge your phone as well.
I love that. I'm gonna get one.
And they'll hold the charge, they'll be on for like 8 hours before they run out of battery.
Perfect.
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Learning lots of good stuff.
Yeah, I've had 2 of them. I really love them. They're just so lightweight. They're just ounces.
Mhm.
And you almost don't need to deflate them if it's not really important that it go into a bag. It's easier to keep it open and operating and charged up, I think.
Right.
Yeah, good mention, Ed.
Yeah. Thank you.
Something else that would also be important if you do experience a power outage is to report that power outage. I think with the smart meters, they're going to be able to track when that actually happens and when a power outage occurs. But if you still have an old meter, they don't know that you are without power unless you report it. So that is an important step, I think, to take as well. Let them know that because your whole street could be with power and maybe you aren't, or just your block and they don't know. Yeah.
And to sign up for the text, after you text the alert to them that you're out, to make sure you're signed up for alerts, because that's the way I was able to notify my renters in Portland that their power was back on and they could come back home, and it was safe to do so. The other thing for power outages in my mind that I'm not quite sure on is how to turn the power back on. And when it comes back on, there is a thing to do with your circuit breaker. There's a whole procedure that you're supposed to go through. And I think it's really important to learn that and to not, I can't tell you how to do it, but I know it's important. I've got the steps on mine. There's an order that you're supposed to do it in so you don't oversurge your appliances or whatever.
Are you supposed to turn the circuit breakers off in the event of a power outage?
That's the question.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll need to do some research on that.
They want you to keep your porch light on so that they can tell you have power and so your neighbors can tell. So you don't turn them all off, but which ones you do and how is something that I actually need to bone up on again before winter. Thank you. Good question.
When I lived in Northeast Oregon, the power company would turn the power off now and then, but they never said anything about messing with the breaker box or anything. They would just, so we would just leave. We'd just leave everything on and the power would go off, and then 3 hours later it'd come back on and it was on again. So I've never heard of a procedure to follow before the power comes back on.
They try to step it or stage it so it's not everybody all at once, and they're very careful about who they let back on to prevent overloading, but there can be some surges, especially in a higher density urban environment.
Yeah. Well,
yeah, something to look into.
I lived in a town of like 100 people. So
lucky you.
at the end of the power line.
And everybody was stealing each other's off of one main. Probably.
Everybody knew what everybody was doing.
Oh, okay.
Jerry and Matt, are ham radios battery operated? Or are they plug-in radios? Would they work in a power outage?
They are typically. You want to take it, Jerry? You're muted. No. Don't want to. Okay.
I'll take it. That's a.
Are we talking handy talkies or mobiles? That's a good question.
Any of them. Do you have use of ham radios in the event of a power outage? I guess just in general.
You want to take it, Jerry? I need a bathroom break.
Okay. So both the handhelds, they work off 110 volts, and the emergency radios that I'll have with me, they work off of 110 volts, except they also allow for a 10 to 14 volt DC connection. So I have the iron phosphate battery and a solar panel, and Matt has the same sort of thing. So we are ready for not having AC power.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah, most hams have backup batteries or battery sources available for either their handheld or their mobile, which is usually off of an automobile battery, or their base stations through different power supplies. So it's a matter of days, though, for a lot of them. It's a frequent topic in discussion of just how long you think you could last, and it's usually maybe a week at most, depending upon how much you transmit.
Well, that's why I also have a solar panel, right? So that I'm able to recharge the battery. And in fact, tomorrow night is the normal MCOM meetings. And I'm planning on setting up my emergency radio on battery power to just practice using it for the online meeting tomorrow.
Nice.
Okay, what I miss?
Nothing exciting.
Sounds like we're covered for a couple of days at least.
Okay.
Matt, I have a question. Do you have solar panels to recharge your batteries?
I do, but they're not yet on the roof. That I need a few parts.
Well, you've seen my portable one, right? That goes to.
It was not memorable. I'm afraid.
Well, mine are on the roof of a cargo camper trailer, and I think they'll be pretty adequate for quite a while, even in Oregon. So I'm really relieved to have purchased that.
What kind did you purchase?
It's a 300 watt panel and inverter and controller on the. It was already installed on the cargo camper. It's just why I bought it, just to have it as a backup power supply unit, as well as a mobile ham shack and a friendly area communication center and map your neighborhood charging station. Yet to be tested.
Oh, yeah.
One of the things that I really think is needed is if you go to a website called PowerWorks, PowerWERX, they have these iron phosphate batteries there. And what they are is they're half the weight and twice the capacity.
Oh.
So they're starting to get, unfortunately, they're extremely expensive. I think for the battery and the controller and the solar panel, I think I paid close to $500.
Are you talking ion or iron? Because there's both.
Iron.
There's two different types. A lot of people prefer the ion over the iron
No,
phosphate for backup.
iron phosphate. It's the FE one. Let me look it up here while we're talking.
Could you maybe put that link in the chat?
I would be happy to.
Thank you.
Friendly chose the ion versus the iron phosphate, but yeah, they're definitely lighter and smaller. And I have one I use for the GMRS space station I'm assigned to use as a quarter leader for a friendly area radio network. And it's still kind of heavy to carry around. I'm going, I'm not going to grab this and run out the door with it. Forget it. Sorry. It's about that big versus a, 12 volt marine deep cycle or whatever.
Did Ian ever find out that information that he was?
Yeah, thank you.
I forgot about him.
I have not stopped looking.
Oh.
It is information that I can find out that I can give you a general understanding of at the moment. It's like since 2011, River Road's canopy coverage has been reduced by 2%. So, I mean, that's a pretty wide spread of things, but in an area that doesn't have a lot of forests or densely packed forested areas, 2% of that amount is a sizable amount. And so the reduction of the canopy is going to be an easier way for us to determine, what's alive and doing well by the amount of coverage the older and more mature trees will have. So the older and more mature that they are, the more breadth they'll have covering a distance. So you can use satellite imaging to look at the difference of the area that's covered and not covered and look at those from year to year. And, it's, when it comes down to River Road, it is more kind of impervious surfaces, so roads and sidewalks, buildings. Yeah, I'd be interested as to what that exact number was. I can get that from the city. I just have to dig a little bit, and they only have record of what's public. And as most of you, if not all of you know, River Road and Santa Clara are very difficult to monitor for them because essentially 2/3 of it is Wayne County, not City of Eugene. So their statistics are going to be a little jumbled as well. So I think understanding what the difference in time of the canopy cover for something like that, would take a significant event for the whole city during that time. You're probably looking at a -8, and that includes the South Hills, where there's going to be much more densely packed areas and more significance, more contribution to anything like that. So I would say that's a pretty sizable amount, whether that's from construction or from ice storms or things. That would be where in the future, we would want to look to figure out what those metrics are if the resources were available.
And Ian, when you say it's public, those are the trees that the city has responsibility for, correct? So it isn't private property trees. We're just talking about those trees that are in parks or at the roadside that the city is responsible for maintaining.
Yeah. So, Jack, do you want to give me permission to share my screen if I don't have it already? I'm actually looking at some of this stuff now.
Yeah, you should be able to. There should be a green share button. If not, let me know.
I think this one. Okay, so can everyone see this map? Okay, so this is what the city looks at on their end for when they're determining what's public or private. Essentially, what is turning into this yellow area, that is City of Eugene. So we can zoom out from River Road and see most of that's there. And then we look at Santa Clara and River Road areas, and we can see that all this white is Lane County, not included. So when you zoom in, all of these dots represent a tree. The green ones will be an existing tree. Yellow ones will be a potential site. Sometimes that means a removal was done there. And a red one will mean that there is a stump currently there. And so they have this information plotted. It's a little hard to find, but this is public information. And these represent the public trees. So the urban forest, which is the right-of-way public, essentially city or county responsibility, is going to consist of 33% of the entire city's canopy, with the other 66 being on private property. So unaccounted for in things like this. So the number that I was looking at for determining what the overall, where is it? Here we go. There's a different program that they're starting to use. And so it shows the over under essentially of the entire area. So we can do this by neighborhood, we can do it by census block, and we're going to see that the darker the green, if that's how much of the entire city's canopy it's composed of. So no surprise, down south we see a lot more green, more density, and then for our area, River Road is composed of 24% of the entire cities. So for us to lose 1-2% is going to be quite more meaningful and have more impact than it would for an area that has, say, 47%, and they're down. The city as a whole, it's interesting. The urban forestry goal that they have for the city of Eugene is 30%. So River Road's kind of close and kind of getting there, but that would have to average out our areas in the south that are highly populated with tree canopy compared to areas like Bethel, which have only 10%, and things that you really need to advocate for and understand with those scorings is where is it suitable to plant, where is there more factors that lay outside of who has the money to do it. So this map is going to show by census block these different kinds of characters of what is an area hotter, cooler, what is the average income. Essentially, it should read like a heat map for where needs canopy and tree protection and planting done. We look at this, we can look at for neighborhood, essentially what kind of returns we're getting on the trees in this specific area. And so it should be, I don't know if they change these for the city or for whatever plot you do, but you know, these are things that I have worked with in the past to advocate for why or why not tree monitoring is important in understanding the conditions of a social area or the buildability for upcoming cultural inflow, since we're seeing a lot of people enter this area.
I heard the goal is 30%, but currently we're at 23% citywide or something like that.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so, and it's gone down 1% overall. It's 30% is really ambitious. The characteristics of the neighborhoods in Eugene are very distinct, and it's an area that's growing rapidly. So even if we want to say, you know, we plant 1 million trees tomorrow, you know, what's the survival rate of those trees, and is it accounting for expansion of residential housing?
Yeah.
So there's competing interests in there that makes it really interesting, and really, I think, a very key litmus test in a lot of determining lists for like public planning. Essentially, you follow the money on where it is. You can follow tree canopy for where protected areas are and where are not.
I wonder how this is going to be affected by the increased risk of fire, and certainly the selection of the trees to be planted would be a big factor.
Yeah, that's our concern, that they're not getting watered now, and the climate change and the new plantings should be more drought resistant. And how can we determine that in these higher heat zones, et cetera, et cetera? I just hate to see that all these new street trees go in and not get watered. It's been a real crime over the past 10 years, actually, and the last couple too.
Well, and in Sacramento, where they were known as the city of trees, new construction would cut very badly the root systems of existing large canopy trees. And then it took a while, but eventually those trees would rot and die. And they couldn't get the adequate water, and they were ruthlessly butchered.
Yeah.
By ignorance and by trying to cut costs and so on, inappropriate plantings, inappropriate bill.
Can I jump in here? So the Bethel neighborhood is having a large, so being a tree desert, I guess, in the Bethel neighborhood. We're partnering with the city and with a group called Friends of Trees, I think, and we're getting trees planted in several of the neighborhoods in the Bethel area this winter, and so some will be in parks, and then some will be in front of people's houses, and it's just so it's anyway, it's a project. I'm not very involved in it, but Lynn, of course, would know all about it. But and it's certainly not costing the neighborhood organization anything, because we don't have any money. But I'm not sure, not exactly sure who's paying for it, but it may be. Anyway, it's happening this winter, and there's different people. Landowners get to pick the species that go in front of their houses. We're going to have some tree walks and neighborhood surveys to ask people what kind of trees they want, or if they want trees, or whatever. You don't have to get a tree. but you can.
Very interesting. Friends of Trees is one of the guests on our Monday neighborhood association meeting on trees. So that you've given me good ideas on questions. Thanks.
Yeah.
All they can do is plant them and put up signs that saying, please water me. And then the neighbors don't. And the city used to come around with trucks, but it no longer does.
Oh,
So it's not, it's interactive. It's please stress that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Lynn is asking the people on the board to if any of us want to be have a tree watering truck. I'd probably put like a little water tank in the back of a pickup and drive around, but I've seen people do that in the cities, and it's kind of a lot of work to ask somebody to do.
Yeah. Yeah, and they got paid good money for it. City staff did here in Eugene for years. You just see them, you know, standing there looking off in the distance while the hose is running. It's like, okay, that looks like an easy job. I could do that. But yeah, getting the water now. So drought tolerant. They still need watering though. You can't.
Maybe a ton
The-
usually.
The problem with drought ones is that they can soak during the rainy season, and that's not good for their roots like we have here. They can flood out. Ian knows so much more about that. I'm tempted to invite you to come to our meeting and talk to us.
I'd love to.
Oh, great. Well, we'll see. Thank you, Ian.
Yeah, I mean, Friendly is like the one neighborhood I'm probably like most prepared for, specifically for that. So I'd be happy to. In regards to the watering trucks and Friends of Trees, so the city works with Friends of Trees in terms of planning programs. Usually the city will have funding from another source or have a budget set aside for trees that they're going to plant, but they essentially contract Friends of Trees to do it. And so they get to bring in neighbors and there's more interconnectedness. So the idea of that is they know they don't have the budget to have the watering staff as much as they used to anymore. So they need to have buy-in, public buy-in. So this is how they try and work with that, these different groups on these things. You know, I think if you looked at the numbers, which they usually don't have the luxury of looking at zoomed out, but you know, you would save a lot of money maintaining trees early on than you would in replacing and buying new ones later.
Yeah.
But the species type is really difficult for street trees, especially because they are exposed to much more toxins, much more hard metals, a lot of different things that, you know, traditionally drought resistant trees that are bigger and stronger, they need a lot more space for. So being able to find ones that don't need to be babied for the first 15 years and then are just too big after 25, it's a small list. And with things changing, it's hard for anyone to say, hey, let's throw a couple thousand at this, only for it to die 2 years later, you know? So it's very difficult to determine and understand.
Interesting.
Depressing.
Yeah, and I lived in Springfield and I had a 90-foot Douglas fir in my front yard, and I just worried about it all the time. We had the tree surgeons out every year to just check it out and to knock down the widow makers. And you know, having a 90-foot tree is just really a kind of a hazard for your house. But what are good species to plant as street trees in Eugene?
You know, they have a list that they reference. I don't know the last time it's been updated, but that would be a great question for, you know, interacting with Friends of Trees, because when they hand you a list and say, here's the palette to choose from, those are ones that they prioritize the survival rate of. And Eric Burke is the lead in Eugene for that, and he takes it very, very seriously. And, you know, there's a lot of varying factors that it's a site-by-site kind of deal. But let me see if I can pull up the one, like the recommended list for the city as a general thing.
This might seem like we're getting off topic, but as I mentioned, the trees coming down were the major cause of the power going out during the ice storms and windstorms that we've had in Eugene. And, you know, even summer limb drop of certain types of species can be an issue. But yeah, and how fast they grow and how much they spread and who's in charge of trimming them is all really important stuff for, I think, for emergency preparedness awareness. Just to throw that in.
Absolutely. And, you know, knowing who to call in those situations too is probably 65% of what I find myself working with in my personal business. And, you know, it's usually city or eWeb, but it takes a really confusing route to get to them sometimes, and to ask the right questions, because there's definitely people that want to know and that can help. It's just a matter of how easily can the customer get to them. And yeah, if you ever come in a situation with it like that, let me know. I can try and help as I can.
Well, Southeast Neighbors and and Friendly have been trying to form volunteer response teams to go out with chainsaws and get the streets clear if needed. And there's a lot of liability involved and issues around that. And it turns out that, you know, eWeb kept saying, we've got this covered. We've got this whole system. All you need to do is report it to us, and we've got all our contractors and we'll get on it. And, you know, unless there's a big earthquake or something, it can be best not to send your own neighbors out to do things like that, and just to rely on the authorities for once in this circumstance, possibly. What do you think, Ian?
I think if you're asking the right questions and you can kind of have someone facilitate for you, you know, it makes it a lot more objective, understanding what needs to happen, what is the limit, what isn't the limit. And I think the public trust to these organizations is, you know, subdued. I think there's a lot of requests in and only so much output available.
Yeah.
But I've seen both of those agencies specifically handle things really well, really poorly, in between. Usually the biggest issue is, are we connecting the right information?
It sounds like the neighborhood associations that are maybe wanting to enhance the trees definitely need to ask those questions, and also consider that they may need to have a committee to manage those trees if they are going to enter into that kind of effort, and not assume that others are going to take care of them.
Good point.
Yeah, I would say if there was an organized effort from the public that was organized to some level, and they wanted to represent a neighborhood, whether it was with their committee or anything like that, I think there's bandwidth for that. I think that would go well. That's a thought.
A thought that I just had listening to you all talk about reporting when you have an issue, it made me think of some of our neighbors who may not have access to the internet, may not have access to that contact information for eWeb or the tree service, or who they need to call. So something to keep in mind as we maybe see our neighbors struggling with that or don't have those resources. That's definitely a takeaway that I'd like to take, to see how can the neighborhood organization make that information more front and center for people. You know, not everybody has internet access, not everybody gets emails, not everybody can just go online and look that information up. So how can we share that with our neighbors a little more readily?
eWeb's really good about having a text platform available for a lot of that stuff, but that you have to know about it. You have to know
Right.
how to get involved with it. And that, although they send out flyers in their bills, people like me get bills online and don't get the flyers. So we don't get that information. You know, they encourage you to go paperless, and then they don't tell you what you're missing when you do. So that's a good idea, to let people know how they can get in touch with everybody.
Yeah.
I put the links for eWeb's request form and Eugene's. If you don't have it, if you've never used it and you want to see it, if you're interested in talking more about it with me, I would be happy to. Yeah, it's absolutely useless if people don't see it, can't find it, don't know how to use it. Definitely one of my biggest pet peeves with them, but alas, we are human after all.
I'll jump in again here. We had a preemptive power shut off session with eWeb asking what they were going to do in red flag situations and if they would preemptively shut off the power. And they said that they had some information on how they were monitoring vulnerable citizens on, dialysis and oxygen or needing electricity. But that was so buried in their website that nobody could find out how to get on that. And I've been trying to get find that, and I can't find it. So that's another issue with eWeb's contact information that might be necessary if somebody can do an internet or sign them up somehow for their relatives who are in a vulnerable situation and red flag shutoffs. They did not expect to have any in Eugene area, and so far there haven't been any in the urban area. But everything's still possible right now on the anniversary of what.
Yes, thank you, Thea. All right, so I want to do a time check real quick. We only have about 15 minutes left in our meeting. So I'd like to switch gears really quick. I have a quick little fun item to share with you all. I'm going to try to share a couple of images. We are working on creating a banner for the emergency preparedness team. We were potentially going to have a neighborhood picnic last month, and that got canceled because of the pandemic. So in light of that, we realized we really had no tabling materials to go and set up and talk to people and let our neighbors who we were. So Charles has created some draft banners for us that I want to share and see what people's thoughts were, if we like any of them, to have them printed to hang on the front of a table. So I'm going to try to share here. Charles, feel free to add anything else that you like.
Well, yeah, I'm curious myself. I haven't seen them in a while.
Oh, wonderful. Excellent.
All right. So we have 3 color options to look at. Let me move some things out of the way here. They all have the same content on them. Emergency preparedness, you are the help until help arrives. We have our River Road Community Organization logo, and then we say who our team is, and then our contact information. So they're all pretty straightforward. So this first one is a yellow and orange combination. And Zoom won't let me share them all at the same time. So that was number 1. Number 2 is a yellow and tan combination. Same information. And then we have number 3.
Drumroll.
Which is a blue and gray and red combination.
That one looks good. Very modern.
Like in the blue one, okay.
I like that one as well.
That is getting my vote as well.
Good feedback
I like
there.
the first one.
Yeah. It's we had a handout that was very much like this blue one. And when we went to the printer, he said it was going to not turn out. Well, that's why the white outline was added on the lettering, that red and blue together in the print process tends to lose some of its vividness, I guess. And that doesn't show up on the screen graphically, but so I started to think maybe we can think out of the box more and looked up what other emergency preparedness literature is. And very often it is the yellow and red. I was rather surprised to find out. So that led me in that direction. And really what we're trying to do is grab people's attention in a crowd. If we had an information booth, for instance, at a fair, trying to lure them in, make it very readable. So thank you for your feedback.
Yeah, that's helpful. So if I were to number these, at the top left, we have number 1, bottom left, we have number 2, and then the blue one would be number 3. If everybody can hold up a 1, 2, or 3.
Can I ask a question first?
Oh, yeah.
Does Charles see, is there a reason there's, because it seems to me like on the yellow ones, they're really vibrant, but then the banner underneath is sort of the same color, in that scheme. And I was just wondering if there was a reason for that, or, did the printer suggest something like that?
Mhm. Yeah, the printer did not suggest any of that. I was going off of other examples that were common with emergency preparedness literature. My concern about changing the family of colors is that that can make it look much more choppy. And I mean, I could do some mock-ups, but that was my initial thought in keeping it in the same family. But I could certainly try that.
Have you
I kind of want to go ahead.
used a color wheel before?
I used to be I used to support myself in art. I've studied
Oh,
art.
well, then I'm not going to even ask. Okay.
No, go ahead. I
No,
mean,
you're the expert.
no, it's not about expert really. It's also preference,
Yeah.
just personal preference. It's this is not overly busy, I don't think, but the trick to effective graphics like this is often keeping it simple
Right.
and not adding unnecessary variables. But again, it could be that that some, it just
No, I just was wondering, I mean, I like the yellow with the red just because if it's on a banner and you're hanging it in front of a booth or something, it's going to
Mhm.
attract some attention. And then
Right.
if they get close, they can read the rest of it there.
Yeah.
Because it's
But
going to be big enough that, yeah.
Yeah, the size we were looking at is 2 feet by 3 feet.
Okay.
And that would be a pretty good size. It would certainly be visible for quite a distance.
Okay.
Is there a color you wish the lower banner would be, the lower portion of the banner?
Well, I'm adverse to anything orange.
Uh-huh.
That's
Okay.
because I'm a Duck fan, but no, it's fine.
Thea, did you have something to add?
Oh, I love the yellow. But I wanted to add something that we just came up with. We didn't get it in time for our banner. We did consider it in time, but the banner customized thing was already in with Sign Pro, who I would recommend. But we used it for our booth last month, and that was a QR code that leads somebody to our website page. They can walk by, snap the QR code, and then go on without having to wade their way through to get the displays or handouts or whatever. So that's just something to consider of the future. I don't know where you'd put that with all the other stuff on there.
That could be accommodated. And actually, we used a QR code, I believe, on some other literature for our picnic that had to be canceled. So I could probably get that graphic and add it very easily. I don't like the looks of them, but I understand the utility of it.
It doesn't have to be too big. They can always, take the picture and blow it up. So
yeah, and I mean, considering how big this will be printed, it really can be quite small. I think,
Jerry, did you have something?
Yeah, I did. Hold on a second. I think I just did something. Are you there?
Yep.
we hear you.
All right. So I'll throw a monkey wrench into the game here. I kind of like this gray on number 3. Would that look good under the yellow? Because I think the RRC logo shows out better on number 3.
Yeah.
And the type seems to as
Yeah.
well.
It does.
Yeah.
I agree. But I
It
don't
looks
know.
more official, more government-y too.
It's worth trying. I don't know that I personally would want gray next to yellow, but perhaps a a soft green that maybe had some gray to it. I don't know.
Well, just make it, what I think what everyone's saying is that you can read the information better with the gray. So maybe you could look at different colors that might match up with the yellow and that are more readable in the smaller print.
Well, realize this is going to be 2 feet by 3 feet.
Right, but
So, yes, but I hear what you're saying is to make sure that the print is legible or, yeah, readable.
you can see it from a little ways away.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I think that's all good feedback. Maybe we can go back and make another round of suggestions and share with the group in our next meeting to get something finalized. All right. All right, let me stop sharing here. So we only have about 5 minutes left in our meeting. We did have a couple of other topics that we didn't get to today. One of them that I would maybe like everybody to think about for us to talk about next time is, what does a neighborhood emergency plan mean to you? When you hear those words, what do you think of? When you hear neighborhood emergency plan, is it something that you think of as useful? Is there something that you would like to see as being useful in that document? We do have a couple of minutes if anybody would like to share their thoughts, but this is a topic that we'd like to start diving into to find out, what information do we need to write down as a neighborhood together? So what do you all think about that? And we have a couple minutes if anybody wants to share.
I love plans. I think plans are what are my salvation, you know, but whenever I'm going to do anything, I just try to sit down and think about what I'm going to do and just plan it out. And a lot of times write it down, and so I don't forget stuff. But it's just, I really think, you know, I really think I'm lost if I don't have a plan. So that's my 2 cents worth.
Thank you, Ed.
I love the idea of plans too. And having seen I've looked at one in particular from the Southeast Hills, and I'm sure that plan was fabulous and still has many wonderful qualities and parts, but it was written a number of years ago, and you can tell in reading it that wildfire wasn't considered a big threat at that time. Pandemics weren't considered a big threat at that time. And a plan that I would see for us would need to be constantly being updated. And that's what reassures me about having a planning process that can be frequently reviewed and made as relevant as possible on an ongoing basis. So yes to plan, and secondarily, yes to frequent review and updating.
And the other thing would be to make sure that the plan is set so that it's relatively easy to, you know, add some new thing like the pandemic or fire, so that you don't have to rewrite the whole thing to get that information in there. So, you know, you could have sections about a section about all the different potential problems you could have and the risks associated with those, and then just update that as needed. So you're
kind of modular, you know.
Yeah.
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 Like that. I also like the idea of it being able to be shared with our neighbor or associations or organizations and work together collaboratively in things that necessarily affect all of us, just despite the fact that there's an artificial barrier or boundary between us.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
Um,
Won't matter during an emergency that there's an artificial boundary.
Jackie and I recently looked at sites that we thought would be good gathering sites if it was suddenly unsafe for people to stay in their homes. And there is a huge area that is right at the base of the overpass on Maxwell that goes into the Bethel neighborhood. And I kept thinking, God, I'm sure we would be going over that overpass if it's still standing to go over to Bethel, but I can't wait to talk to Bethel about this so they know that it also is here.
Yeah, Jared.
I would wonder what the railroad has at that area in case of an emergency.
Good idea. Good question.
Someone might consider contacting them.
Yeah. I can imagine there's
Yeah.
a lot of toxins there that we might want to know about.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
I'm just worried about if that overpass goes out,
Yeah.
block the main north-south railroad crossing. I mean,
Absolutely.
that's the main corridor.
It would be a nightmare.
So they have plans, I'm sure.
Same thing with the Chambers overpass.
Yeah, same thing.
Absolutely. All right. Well, these are all really good starts of ideas. I definitely want to continue this conversation in the coming months. So if anybody has something they want to share more of now and get it off your brain, feel free to email me. We'll make sure to get it into the notes. And we're at time tonight, so I want to let everybody go for the evening. But thank you all for coming tonight. We appreciate it. We'll have the meeting notes and all the links sent out in the next day or so once that recording is uploaded. So thank
Great.
you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Good to see
Jackie.
you all.
Good
Have a
night.
good one.
Thank you. Bye.